Good morning, everybody. It is Sunday morning. This is the Promise Backlund Show, Sunday Service Edition. And it's also episode 4 of my podcast, which is really wild because the fact that I've been able to learn how to do something like this is just not like me. Like, I usually don't have the guts to do this sort of thing. I definitely don't have the skills, but thanks to the different apps and platforms I've found to use, it's been a lot easier. And you guys, the feedback has been incredible. So that makes it totally worth it. And it's been a fun time so far. And I'm looking forward to seeing what this turns into. But for today, we are going to get into a Q&A later in the show. You guys sent in some great questions again this week. I've loved the ones y'all have sent in. I also have another evangelical scandal to talk about. And I've got an anti-sermon for you. But before we get into that, if you're seeing my hair right now, for those of you who aren't on audio only, this is actually, I haven't dried my hair yet. It's still kind of drying. It's crazy over here. You can see my laundry is drying. You can see suitcases being packed. I'm getting ready for a 12-day work trip with, luckily my husband is going with me, and so it's going to be a fun time as well. But it's been crazy. It's just a lot to prep for. And I don't know what podcast episodes I'll have coming out while I'm gone. I'm going to do my best to still have them, or at least every other one will still be released, and we'll for sure get back in the swing of things when I'm back in town. But I'm going to see if I might even be able to pull off like a hotel room, like a Paris episode for you guys, which could be fun. The quality of the camera might just be not so good. It's the only problem, but we'll see. And then today, at least for you guys today, Sunday afternoon, I'm going to be on the Sunday show over on the line with Matt Dillahunty. I'm so excited. I haven't done a Sunday show in so long, and Matt is one of my favorite people. For those of you who don't know this part of my story, when I was deconstructing from everything, I realized I didn't believe in a God anymore. And, I felt free from all of that, but I didn't know what I thought about a lot of other stuff. And mostly I didn't know how to word it at all. And I was very intimidated by the arguments from the religious community I left behind, and just felt insecure about a lot of stuff. And so I was learning as much as I could. I was listening to different debates online, which eventually led to me finding Matt Dillahunty. And he was doing those call-in shows and gave me confidence to start thinking for myself on a whole nother level. Because so much of what he was saying just made perfect sense to me. It felt almost like common sense that I should have already thought this way or thought of this thing, but he just worded it so clearly. And him and Seth Andrews, honestly, just were a huge help to my journey. And I would listen every Sunday to Matt debating. And it was life-changing. It helped me also build up the courage and the information to say, oh, I'm an atheist. I already was, but I just didn't know that that's what I was. And I didn't know that it wasn't that scary of a thing to say, and that it was worth the judgment that comes from other people if I can be confident enough in my position. So anyways, all that to say, it's still, every time I'm doing something with Matt, even though now he's just also a great friend, it's surreal because it's like that whole never meet your heroes, except meeting Matt and getting to know him just as a human. That is one of the heroes I've met in my life where I am just so grateful I did, because he's only even a more incredible person, knowing him off of the line. And I'm just so blown away that I get to work with somebody like him. I'm blown away that he would want to work with me. It's an incredible feeling. So that's just a little behind the scenes for you guys to know. When I'm doing these shows and I'm working with Matt, every time I'm just sitting there starstruck isn't the right word. It's just a feeling of gratitude in my life that it's brought me to this place to where I get to be doing what I love doing with people that taught me how to do it. Not a lot of people get to say that. So anyways, that's my little morning moment of gratitude to let you guys in on. But yeah, I haven't even had time to do hair, makeup. And I was just like, you know what? You guys are going to be okay with that. First of all, some people listen audio only, so you won't be too disturbed. And the rest of you, I feel like we're friends. I can show up as myself, and this is me. So this is what we got for today. But I do want to get into today's anti-sermon, which I know there was a lot of things last weekend I said we could get into. I said maybe we'd talk about purity culture. Maybe we'd talk about cosmic nihilism. Maybe we talk about, a part 2 to free will. And there are some conversations to be had there because a lot of you had more questions or even criticisms of what I said. And I want to get into that, but I kind of want to let more comments come in on that end before I address it. And there was something else that I really wanted to talk about today. You could say that it was strong on my heart. Just kidding. It wasn't like that, but just something that I wanted to talk about because it's something important to me. And that is the act of being present and how that was actually the first skill or the first tool. I think that's a better word for it. The first tool that I learned when I started my journey out of faith. And that's the one that really helped me continue on in my journey, despite the intense anxiety and mental health issues that I was going through and trying to process at the time. But before we get into that, I'm realizing that that's your little preview because we do have our riddle of the day. So we'll do our riddle and then we'll get into why, what I wanted to talk about specifically when it comes to the act of being present. So here's your riddle, which is, what loses its head in the morning, but gets it back at night? It loses its head in the morning, but gets it back at night. And that would be your pillow. I thought that was a cute one. Also, I think it's so interesting to learn what everyone's pillow setup is. And if you've always had the same pillow setup, or if it has changed over time. I feel like mine has changed over time, whereas I used to have kind of like a 2-pillow moment where I like to have I liked a very fluffy pillow that was pretty firm, I guess is the right word. And then I had a body pillow, which I really liked. That was when I was with people that, where we really weren't cuddling that much. Now, the last few years, my husband is my body pillow. And I like the down feather pillow where it almost squishes all the way down, where it's kind of like, why do you even have that pillow? And I don't know if this is just a getting older person thing or what, but let me know in the comments what your pillow setup is. It's so intriguing to me. I know there's some people who like those memory foam pillows, which I tried before, where it's, it's got like a hump in it for your neck. It destroyed my shoulders. And I don't know if it's because of my size or what. I hated it. So it's fascinating to me when people are really into those like extremely firm, high up pillows. Also important to note when we're talking about pillows, I am definitely a stomach / I look like a crime scene, like the chalk outline of a body. Like that's how I like to sleep, preferably. Sometimes on my side, but usually just on my stomach. I know you're not supposed to sleep that way. I don't care. I'm not sleeping on my back. I get sleep paralysis when I sleep on my back. And so that is reserved for when I have a cold and I cannot breathe. I sit slightly sitting up. So anyways, that's our intro, which is basically about the opposite of what we're talking about. Because when I'm asleep, I'm not being present. Or you could say I'm actually being the most present possible. I don't know. But I did want to talk about this and really quickly, before we get into it, I want you to take 5 seconds and I'll count it out in my head. Just take a couple of deep breaths in and be present. And what I mean by that is don't put your thoughts on something that's happening later. Don't put your thoughts on something that happened earlier. Put your thoughts on whatever's happening right now. So if you can hear sounds of something going on, if you feel, the chair underneath you, maybe you even have a headache or you're hungry, think about these things. Just sit there and be present with whatever is happening in this exact moment, just as a little experiment. So, ready? Let's do it together. Okay. That might have been more than 5 seconds. I don't know. But I started enjoying just sitting there too much. If that felt uncomfortable for you, please know that that's exactly where I was at when I first even learned about this concept of being present. I had learned about the concept of being in the presence of God, where you're kind of in worship or in prayer or something. But even then, you're like focusing your thoughts on something specific, and you're certainly not trying to feel whatever is going around you in that moment. So, very different. Being present is not worshiping at all. It is witnessing the moment at hand. And to me, worship was always taught as this idea where you're shifting your attention to God, you're thinking about this external thing, and you're certainly not supposed to be thinking of yourself unless you're thinking about like how sinful and grateful you are that God can cover those sins. But this was such an important tool for me to learn after we got to come up with a better word than deconstruction, but whatever that was. And I didn't see it as what I see it as now. I see it now as, like I said, a practical tool. At the time, I was embracing it more as a spiritual practice because I kind of felt like I needed to replace some of my old habits with something, but it turned into a survival skill for me. It is what helped me get through so many difficult things when I was in that in-between process of feeling comfortable with my position of disbelief. And it helped me cope with the chaos that comes with life, but also with that in between, that gray area, the anxiety, guilt, feeling like I'm waiting to figure myself out, but like, when is that ever going to come? All of that present gave me the ability to be grounded and to root myself in something real instead of a higher power. It sounds woo-woo. I understand. I'm going to say a lot of things that some of you are going to cringe at and be like, oh, we're getting woo-woo. I promise we're not. We're not getting woo-woo at all. I don't even consider myself spiritual, if that tells you anything about where I'm at now. It's a practical tool. In evangelicalism, you have to understand, they are obsessed with, to me, the opposite of presence. They are obsessed with what is going to eventually happen. Going to heaven, maybe the rapture, maybe there's going to be a revival that's coming. If it's meaningful, it's in the future. Or it's in the past. It's what God did for us. It's his son dying on the cross, all of that. There was literally this song. Who was the band? Was it LaRue or Plum or Switchfoot or something like that? That was about a waiting room, how this world is just a waiting room. Like, this is just a waiting room and we're waiting for your love. I can't remember. I have the tune in my head, but I remember looking at life that way. Like, this is just a waiting room. We're just waiting for the ultimate life, which is going to be in heaven someday. And so life wasn't going to happen till after death. That's not being very present. And that's definitely not valuing the present. And that rewired my brain for just constant anticipation, which I think really fed into the anxiety, the religious trauma, the OCD that was going on. It created a feedback loop, essentially. But that loop, I called it faith. That was faith. It was hope in things unseen, hope for what is to come. It was my mind just constantly looking towards someday, to the point that when I was present, it felt wrong. It felt not okay. If I was enjoying my meal and just focused on that, if I was just enjoying a sunset for what it is and not thinking about how, like, oh, God designed the earth and did this and made this for me, then that was wrong. Indulging in presence felt like a sin constantly. It's not that that was outright taught to me, but it was in these little micro ways. And if you grew up that way, you know what I'm talking about. Anything pleasurable, of course, was off the table, but even more so just normal things. Like, if I were to sit there and really enjoy a cup of coffee, it would have felt like that's not enough unless it's maybe shifting that gratitude and that enjoyment towards, thank you, God, for letting me be here and letting me enjoy this, instead of just focusing on that exact moment. So when I first left religion, I had this fear of what is going to replace this hope I had for the future. What do I have now? And how do I cope with anxiety and the chaos of life if I don't have this someday? What do I do? What do I do? And for whatever reason, I don't remember how I came across his work. And this is where some of you are going to say, like, Thomas, please don't get woo-woo. Again, bear with me. Follow it all the way through with me. I promise we're not staying here. But I came across Eckhart Tolle. And if you're not familiar with him, Um, I guess he's what some would consider to be a philosopher or a spiritual guru, something like that. I don't really know how I feel about him today as a person. I just know how I feel about some of the teachings that I learned from him in his book, because I came across his book probably around the time I was buying tarot cards at a metaphysical shop, but The Power of Now. And that book was all about being present, but it was about noticing your thoughts instead of obeying them. It was about having awareness without the shame and without the judgment. And it gave me tools to interrupt that anxiety loop that I had before without this mental chatter of trying to be good enough or saved or focusing on something from the future or the past. And it gave me some skills to just sit and breathe and become self-aware in a way that religion had not allowed me to be, to get to know myself, to get to know my thoughts, and yet to also create some separation to where I didn't have to be living in this, identity. I didn't have to identify with my thoughts anymore, which was a really helpful skill to learn when my thoughts were so all over the place at the time. I really didn't know what I believed, and I didn't know how to process so many things that I was having to process. If I had to identify with those thoughts like I did as a Christian, where I was having to identify with these things that went through my head and either feel shame or holiness for it, I would have been a wreck. And so these teachings from him really allowed me to just develop the skill of being courageous toward this moment. I don't know if that even makes sense. It was life-changing for me, and I'll always be grateful for that book. And then A New Earth ended up being even better. And I hesitate recommending these books because if somebody has a tendency to fall into woo-woo stuff, then I don't want to recommend them. And if you're somebody that is so put off by that sort of abstract spiritualized language, then you might not like it either. But if you're somebody that loves to just read something and take what you can get out of it and ignore the rest, I do recommend these. But what was cool is that in reading these books and then eventually going to figure out later on, what I really thought about meditation and spirituality and other rituals that, non-religious people find helpful, but maybe I wasn't sure if they're woo-woo or not. I started studying, some of the neuroscience behind it. So mindfulness and just paying attention to things. Yes, people can put these abstract and spiritual terms behind them, but it's a neurological process. Sitting here, being mindful that, I have an itch behind my ear right now. This cushion I'm sitting on is actually pretty comfortable. I definitely am going to want a cup of tea after this because my throat's feeling a bit scratchy. I can hear the nice little sound of the radio. I'm sitting here and I'm taking in everything around me. That doesn't sound that exciting, but depending on where I'm at and what I'm going through, it actually is extremely grounding. It's extremely soothing to somebody whose nervous system has been spiritually bypassed their whole entire early adult life. And that's what was happening to me. If I felt uncomfortable about something, instead of leaning in and figuring out what it is and why I feel that way and addressing it, it was all about praying it away. If I was fearful about something, it was about praying it away. If I was hyper-focused on something that I shouldn't be, it was about wow, you're a sinner, you're a terrible person, you need to feel shame about that, you need to pray it away. But mindfulness and attention on the things that are happening right here and now is just a neurological process. There's nothing woo-woo or magical or anything about that, and yet it has these incredible effects on the body. There's so many studies out there that show how present moment awareness reduces brain activity in a good way. It strengthens emotional regulation and it lowers your cortisol. So we see the actual benefits of this practice in real life. And being present isn't about clearing your mind. I think that's what I thought. I thought I'm supposed to have an empty brain somehow, which for me, that does not happen at all. It's more about just taking in data, basically. Maybe that helps some of you to hear it in that way. It's about taking in maybe the breaths that you're having, maybe the temperature around you, maybe how gravity feels on your body, maybe just the different sounds around you when you're eating, maybe it's the taste or textures. And then that awareness is what the body uses to reset the nervous system. So that's how it will slow your heart rate, or impact your vagus nerve, whether for better or worse. And it's funny because, for example, I have always been terrified of flying. I hate it. I hate it so much. However, the more I'm able to be super present in a moment of turbulence, I actually notice my body calming down more, because when I'm not present, when I'm thinking about, oh my God, what if we crash? What if something bad happens? What if this gets worse? That's not me being present. Being present is sitting there and going, wow, I feel like we're going up a little bit. Now I feel like we're going down a little bit. Oh, wow, this feels like we're rocking. Wow, this feels really smooth all of a sudden. The air feels nice and cool. If I focus my attention on actually the only thing that's happening in that, which is significantly less than a whole entire plane crash, then I'm able to soothe my nervous system. And in the past, what I would have done is sat there praying. I would have sat there commanding angels to take control of the flight and, declaring that demons would not have their way and all of the ridiculousness. And that's not being present. That's not being present at all. So learning this tool for me was basically what replaced spiritual warfare, funny enough, because it is the antithesis of it. It's accepting everything that's happening. There's nothing I can do in those moments. If something feels turbulent, if the air is freezing cold, whatever it is, I can't change those things, but I can sit there with it and I can just notice it. I don't have to sit and think, and it's terrifying me, or, and I hate it, or, and I'm uncomfortable. I just focus on the actual data points of what is going on. Something I've noticed is a lot of people that grew up in high control religion, we are not good at being present in our bodies. We have kind of cut ourselves off from them in a lot of ways. We have shut down the sensations. And some of that was to protect ourselves, I think, but a lot of it causes us to miss out on life, on pleasure, on joy, on just experiences. And we're so up in our heads constantly because of this survival mode that religious trauma put us into, that we're unable to really just feel at home in this present body. So many of us were taught this theology of that basically, like, this body doesn't even matter. All flesh is grass fading away, that someday we'd get into our heavenly bodies. And we devalued ourselves. We devalued the one thing we do have. And I think that caused a rejection of presence. Because even if you can sit there and meditate, a lot of times people miss out on like actually feeling physical sensations in their body. Part of therapy for me was learning how to literally feel again and notice when things make me, even if it's uncomfortable, like how that feels in my body. My therapist would, bring something up, talk about something, and she would say, but where do you feel that? And I'd say, oh, like, it makes me feel uncomfortable. And she said, no, like what body part? Like where? And I'm like, what do you mean? I don't feel anything. And through the course of therapy, I started being able to actually notice, oh, my heart rate is increasing, or, oh, that makes my stomach turn, kind of, to think about this. And I realized all the ways I had cut myself off because those things were happening. My body was still bearing the brunt of these traumas and just like how it takes in the world around it, but I wasn't being present with it. I wasn't listening to it. And I wasn't my full self. I was disconnected. And it's not magic. It is not like this woo-woo thing. It's literally just self-regulation. It is calming your nervous system by just simply being aware and being with it and not judging it and not attempting to change things that you can't change. It's just acceptance and presence. The coolest thing that I got out of learning how to be present is awe and wonder. It is the ability to go on a walk, just going to the grocery store and have what I would have called a spiritual encounter back when I was religious, that now is just an everyday act, an everyday feeling for me, where I'm walking and I'm focusing on, okay, I feel the wind blowing in my hair. I'm seeing these bright yellow colored leaves, and there's a really crisp smell in the air, and I can hear people walking around me, and there's a child laughing over there, and I see this beautiful creek over there, and there's these cars going by with people in them, and I see, lights being hung up for the holidays. I can be walking, taking all these things in, taking everything into account, and it feels like a spiritual moment because I just feel alive and I focus on that. I'm like, this feels good. I'm moving forward. I'm enjoying all the colors that I'm seeing. I'm enjoying seeing life happening around me. And in these normal, everyday moments, I'm able to have awe and I'm able to have wonder over nature, over other humans around me, over the feelings that I have, over just the gratitude for being able to participate in these everyday normal things and to just be a human. And that gives dopamine surges. It reduces my focus on myself in a positive way as well. I'm not thinking about, well, I have to do this later and I have to do this. And I'm not thinking about like, are people judging me right now? Am I walking okay? Do I look okay? How's my hair? How's me? How am I? I'm thinking about this moment that's happening right now and everything around me. And it expands my perception of the world, which expands my experiences. And that's just like a silly little example. Imagine how much more that helps things when I'm, on a hike somewhere more intentionally beautiful, or if I'm at a museum, or if I'm at a concert. It is this skill. I don't want to call it a skill because it takes nothing, anybody can do this. But it is a muscle that I've learned to work and turn to that has rewarded me immensely. It has become the best coping tool that I have ever experienced in life on a long-term basis. And that's not to say that things like medication and therapy and all of that aren't incredibly valuable. But as far as the tool that I have just most consistently used and used more and more of, this is the one that has been helpful long term. And it's not supernatural. That's my favorite part. It's not some like supernatural spiritual thing where I have to pretend there's other things going on. There's not. It's literally just reality. It's just being in reality, which sounds so simple because it is. But that's what religion does, is it takes us out of that. It steals present moments from us, and it causes us to take our attention and shift it towards something that isn't right there in front of us, that isn't tangible, that isn't impacting our nervous system. And what's so cool now is with that muscle, with that tool, things like, how the light hits dust, how warm laundry feels when I put it on, how, when there's a little rainbow that shines on the wall from this one little, I have like a little crystal hanging in the window, during that time of day, which is not really happening right now in Finland, but when it does, those moments get to feel like magic to me. And yet they're extremely real, extremely explainable, and they don't require a God at all. They just require me noticing them. And I think the primary thing that's happening there is I'm not having separation between myself and what's happening around me. So it's kind of like that illusion is gone. I'm there. I'm part of it all. And I know this is sounding so woo-woo, guys, but I hope this is helpful to somebody listening. It makes for a beautiful moment. And so when people say that there's no meaning in your life if you're an atheist, or that if you don't believe in the supernatural or spiritual things, then you're missing out, I don't think that's true at all. In fact, I think I have experienced so much more awe and wonder, so much more gratitude, so much more joy and peace since I left religion and started embracing reality. That's when things really started getting cool for me. When I didn't have to sit there and watch the waves on the ocean and think, oh, it's so cool that God is controlling these. Instead, I can just sit and watch them and listen to them and enjoy them. And my brain doesn't have to go outside of that moment. That is what is magic to me. Getting to actually be a part of something incredible, something that makes my brain feel calmed or excited or like it's experiencing beauty without having to leave that moment. My favorite thing about being present is that it doesn't require faith. It doesn't require faith at all. It just requires noticing reality, something real, something right here and now. And that brings about gratitude for things that do change, because everything changes, which is to me what gives value to it. If, this creek is going to look different, not just 10 years from now, 100 years from now, but in the next 5 seconds, the way the water ripples is going to look a little bit different. That adds immense value to me, the witness, to this exact moment that I'm seeing, that I'm participating in. That's where the magic is, not in some fantasy of some far off, maybe someday land, but in what is here and now and what is connecting me to reality. And probably the coolest part about this tool is that nobody has to die for you to experience it. Nobody has to sacrifice themselves on a cross. You don't even have to believe that it works. It's just part of life. We all find ourselves being present at some point, whether we can help it or not. And there's no gospel we have to follow. There's no prayer that we have to say. There's no blind faith. It's just existing with maybe a little bit more intention if you want to experience more. But things are happening all around us. Reality is there, whether we are sitting and being present with it or not. So many of us were sold this lie that we would only find peace, we would only find patience, kindness, love, joy, in its fullness, in its wholeness. They would word it all these different ways. If we were believers, if that peace, joy, love, hope, kindness, faith, all of those things was sourced from God. And if you're like me, when you left religion, it's like, well, shit, where do I get those things from now? I never found them in religion. I kept searching. I kept being told that I would experience them, but I didn't experience those things the way that I was promised I would until I left and learned how to notice that opportunities for experiencing peace or experiencing love or experiencing joy were all around me all the time. It's just that I had never been allowed to be fully present for them. And now that I've learned to exercise that muscle more, I get to experience those little glimmers, those little moments all the time. And maybe they're not this big, impactful, life-changing moment of where it's like, wow, this peace I'm feeling like I'm going to just feel drunk the rest of my life in it because now everything's fine. That's ridiculous. That's never going to happen. And it definitely wasn't happening when I was in religion. And it's not happening for anybody that's in religion now either. But throughout the day, I can have little moments of peace that does cover everything, that does make me feel okay, that does regulate my nervous system and help me get through to the next present moment when I show up for that moment and am ready to experience whatever it holds. In my experience of, sitting there learning how to sit and be present with reality, it almost always results in something positive, because for me, positivity would be, a regulated nervous system. And when I let my senses just take in what's around them and do what they've evolved to do, which is just take in information and acknowledge it without judging it, my brain, my body, all of me feels safer and more at peace. So if you are wanting to find some sort of sense of being grounded or connected that you had hoped you would find in religion, I encourage you to become better acquainted with reality. I know that sounds ridiculous, but look up different methods like for yourself of what works for how to be present. There's different, meditations or mindfulness techniques. I recommend figuring out what works for you instead of me telling you what to do. But I will say a starting point is to literally just sit, maybe set a timer for 30 seconds and take in as many data points for what's around you as you can. Like sit there and just set a timer, make note of how everything smells around you, make note of how different parts of your body are feeling. Maybe your hand is feeling the texture of the desk under it. Maybe your foot can feel the ground under you. Maybe you feel a bit heavy. Maybe you feel light. Maybe, just take in the different sensations. Take in what you can see around you, different colors, what you can feel, the temperature. And that is one of the best ways to start boosting that muscle. Some of you are listening to this and are like, this is ridiculous. I already do all of this all the time. I experience awe and wonder every day of my life. It's so great. Good. I'm so happy for you. For some of us, this very basic, easy thing, it was not very basic and easy because, like I said, it was almost preached against. It was almost, it was oppressed. The theology was not to be in our bodies. The theology was not to put too much value on what's going on around us. The theology was to lessen this world and to shift our focus to that which we can't see or experience in reality. It causes a numbing and it causes you to miss out on potential for all that is and all that is happening around us. So I hope this tool helps some of you. I hope maybe just hearing somebody put words to it or even just acknowledging that it's a thing encourages you and is a helpful little anti-sermon, because presence is an incredibly valuable tool to get the most out of this one life that we have. Let's take a break now, and when we get back, I will share yet another evangelical scandal. All right, welcome back. I told you guys this last week, but I'll say it again in case you're listening for the first time, which is also fun. I think it's important to talk about these scandals and acknowledge, first of all, the positive side, which is some people are being held accountable. Even if it's not by their church, at least the law has done something here. And also to acknowledge that for every one of these that we find out about that comes out, there is so much more hidden. And I hear from people regularly that have horrific stories of abuse and corruption from the ministries they were in that still nothing's happening. No one's doing anything about it. So in sharing these, my hope is to remind people that didn't grow up this way, that this is a reality. This is one of the many reasons we speak out against evangelicalism. But also, I think it's a little bit cathartic. For me, it's like, yeah, I wasn't crazy. This shit is happening. And some of the people, at least, are getting caught. And I hope that continues. So that leads us to the story of Joshua David Kemper. He is a 47-year-old lead pastor at Foothill Church, which is part of Assemblies of God denomination, for those of you who know what that is. And he was just arrested on October 27th for alleged sexual assault of a 15-year-old girl. So again, this is a 47-year-old lead pastor and a 15-year-old girl. He is facing 14 felony charges. I'm not going to read all of them because they're bad. They're really, really awful. Some of them, it starts with sending harmful material to a minor with intent to seduce, contacting a minor with intent to seduce. Then we get on to unlawful intercourse with a minor, and several counts of lewd acts with a minor. There's more and more and more. Just really disgusting stuff. But basically, they've laid out a clear, without us really knowing what happened, just those charges. This guy was grooming a 14-year-old, a 47-year-old pastor, grooming a child. Authorities state that the alleged misconduct occurred between March and July. So I appreciate that they kind of got to this fairly quickly, because so many of these cases we hear about years later after it happened. It happened at multiple locations, the church, the victim's home, and inside the pastor's vehicle. And he was using some kind of special phone number and social media accounts to hide his communication with the victim. So he was going to extensive methods to what they called digital grooming to groom this girl. And they also think that there may be additional victims. So I don't know what information they have, but they're encouraging other people to come forward. He's being jailed with a bond of $500,000. But let's just talk about how disturbing it is that we have a pastor who is claiming to be a divine authority. So this is somebody that people are looking to as their source for morality, as their source for translating the Bible. He is supposed to take care of souls. That's what they believe. And he is grooming children. This is absolutely egregious. It's horrible when teachers assault children. It is horrible when cops, assault citizens that they're supposed to care for. To me, it is even one louder, not to put a hierarchy on any of this, but to have somebody that's claiming to be in connection or under the authority of God over the authority of others, in his church or whatever, grooming children. Your job is to lead people, to counsel people, to protect people. And you have done arguably one of the most disturbing things. Even Jesus talks about how doing something to a child is one of the worst things you can possibly do. Because now this child will have to live with this the rest of her life. And it's not just that this awful, terrible thing happened to her, where an adult betrayed her in that way, where she was harmed in that way. It's a spiritual authority, and she is going to have to face this complex trauma. That is a form of religious trauma on top of these other very significant traumas. That is horrific, and why I think if you are in a position of spiritual authority where you are claiming that a God of the universe is who you are working for, then you should be held to an even higher standard than anyone else. I don't understand how people like that can do that. Maybe he'll go to jail, I hope, but I don't understand how this happens. These men get out of jail and they go back into ministry. I feel like you should never be permitted to claim that you are, working for God in any way ever again. You should not be allowed to be a clergy member after that. You have lost that position. So maybe hold them to a higher standard and don't allow them back, and stop putting people like this back in positions of leadership. And if you're listening to this, and you are somebody that went through something like this, just know that I am so deeply sorry for what you went through. I am so proud of you for what you've done to move forward. And it is my hope that more and more of this stuff is uncovered and that more people are saved from this happening to them, and that there's more accountability as we learn how systemic this issue is. And it's one of the reasons why talking about purity culture is so important to me. I think it has just like rotted evangelical churches from the inside out. And we're finally seeing some of the repercussions of that, and how not addressing it on a systemic level has resulted in systemic predatory behavior. And it's unacceptable. And if that happened to you, again, I'm so sorry, but I'm so proud of you. I'm so proud that you survived. So, on that note, I've got questions from you guys. I love the emails that you guys have been sending in. It's been great. I still owe some of you responses. I'm so sorry. I'm doing what I can. It's been a crazy, crazy work week. But let's get to our first question. This is a question about music. For those of you who don't know, my husband and I have a little like side project called Cadus, Caydus, and we release music sometimes. We put out 2 full albums and a handful of other songs, which you guys are welcome to go listen to. I'll link the like YouTube channel here. But the first album that we put out is called Solstice Interrupted. And it's actually, I would love to do an episode on that, because it's an allegory of my escape from religion, but it's about a family of vampires and how one of them ends up deciding they want to be human instead of stay with the vampires. So that's the vibe for that one. And then the other one is called Contemplations for Nihilists. And that kind of says it all. It's just kind of like an existentialist album of sorts, and it's like kind of got this 90s grunge vibe happening with it. But this question says, "Hi, I'm a musician from the Netherlands. I'm aware you and your husband have recorded and released a handful of albums together. I'm curious as to what your inspirations and your motivations with respects to your own music are. How you started out, whether or not you started out back when you were a Christian, and how your music, sonically and lyrically, has adapted. Or perhaps even what musical facets you kept and have carried over since you were a Christian. Kind regards." Amazing questions. I'll try to answer them as well as I can. But like I said, I think it would also be fun to do a whole episode on this sometime and talk about music in life after being a worship leader, because I was a worship leader. Okay, so inspirations and motivations with respect to our own music. Motivations, we just have fun making music together. We don't really have plans to do anything with it other than just make music when it's fun for us. We've actually talked about, just for fun, doing some live shows here in Europe at some point, but the motivation was just to have a fun hobby project to do together. So that's the main thing there. It's, for me, a way to have some creative expression when I don't often get to do that. And then inspirations, my husband would say different things than me, so I'm not going to answer for him because I should have him on to talk about that. But I would say Metric, Nirvana, Radiohead, Alanis Morissette. There's so many that I'm going to think about later and be like, and that one, and that one, and that one. But those would be mine, some of the top ones, I think. Lyrically, I really love Ethel Cain. I love Phoebe Bridgers, the 1975s, those types of artists. And then, yes, I did start when I was a Christian, because that's when I was involved in music. I was a worship leader. But I stopped doing music for years and years and years. So really meeting my husband and us just having fun making music together is what brought that back out of me. Again, that's a whole story I should save sometime. How our music has adapted. To be honest, I didn't really carry much over at all from when I was a Christian, because I was doing worship songs, which are some of the most boring, repetitive, not exciting. And if you listen to our music, it's definitely on the more creative, experimental side of things. And that's because of my husband's influence. He's incredible when it comes to melodies. And lyrically, I never wrote stuff like this because as a Christian, like I wasn't going to write the kind of lyrics that I'm writing now. So I have to say there's quite a bit of separation. And that's probably why it's been so enjoyable for me, is because not a lot has carried over. I think the only times I've been like, "Oh, that was actually helpful," is we've done a little bit of like some of the songs, we've done a bit of spontaneous, like where we've had a musician playing and then I've just kind of like come up with some random lyrics and started coming up with random melodies and singing it in real time and then we record that. And I used to do that as a worship leader. We had spontaneous worship. So that was one of the few times I was laughing, like, well, there, pretending like God just gave me a song in the middle of worship really has paid off. But thank you so much for that question. I love that. And mostly I love that it's inspired me to want to do an episode on all of this. And I'm trying to get excuses to like make my husband come do this podcast with me one day. So maybe if we talk about music, he'd be down. Another question I have here. Somebody asked if I remember the first time I said fuck and what my thoughts were when I said it. And when did it become comfortable to say it? Because, growing up religious, that's not a common thing to say. And I have to say, actually, I don't remember. I had cousins growing up that were more what we would consider worldly than we were. And so when I was a teenager, I do remember saying bitch for the first time. For some reason. I remember like being at the grocery store because this was back when, you're 16 and your friends like you lovingly call each other bitch and you're like, bitch, what are you doing? Or something like that. And I remember turning to my cousin and saying that because she said that all the time. And I remember her going, oh, I'm so proud of you. Like you're branching out and not being a goody two shoes. And that was like a big deal for me. So I remember that word. I don't remember fuck. I don't remember when I said that and when it started being like a comfortable thing. I've I've been cussing since I was a Christian. So, uh, for some reason that one didn't stick with me very much. I didn't think that words should matter that much. I thought like why would God care about words like that if it's about like my intent and how I'm using it and when I'm using them. So, that was my take on that. I'm very comfortable with that word now. But I think it was just like it depended on who I was hanging out with because that prim proper side of me, um, that was more because I didn't want to make other people uncomfortable. So as I got older, I learned like if I'm in certain crowds, I can say whatever the fuck I want. But that's a fun question. And then the last question of the day I have is, did you ever experience fear of what if I'm wrong after you deconstructed? And if this was your email, first of all, I appreciate the context you shared here. I won't share it on this, but I actually didn't experience that fear. I had the thought of what if I'm wrong, and I played it all the way out. And the way it played out is, what if I'm wrong? Okay, what if I'm wrong? What about the Christian God? What if I'm wrong about Allah? What if I'm wrong about Buddhism? What if I'm wrong? What if, what if I'm wrong and there's a God nobody's ever even heard of or mentioned yet? What if there's another option? And I realized there was so many what ifs that I would have to confront if I were to open up this one what if, that it's ridiculous. And I don't feel like I'm right about something when it comes to religion, in general, in that I don't think, oh, there is no God and I'm right and that's a fact. I don't believe that there is a God. I don't see any reason to believe. I don't see any reason to follow a specific religion as though it were reality. I'm not convinced. And so it's not something I can be wrong about because I'm genuinely unconvinced. Is there a chance that maybe I should be convinced of something? Maybe, but based on the information I've received so far, no, I wouldn't, there's no reason to change my mind about those things. So I think that feeling, if this is something you're struggling with, is more about not being at peace with yourself and where you're at. And there's probably other questions that you might want to get to the bottom of. Like maybe what do you think about how long the earth has existed? Maybe go read, or maybe go watch some of, Bill Nye the Science Guy, or, I'm just giving examples here. But I think sometimes when we're leaving religion and we've been indoctrinated in this way and we're struggling with the fear of like, I don't know where I'm at, like, what do I think? What's really true? What's not? It's just because we don't have enough information. So go get more information and then feel at peace to leave yourself with the position of, I don't know right now. I just don't know. And that's okay. And any being or God that would punish you for not knowing or not being convinced of something, I think you're already going to have issues with that God anyways. Like that's a problem for all of us at that point. So that's not a reasonable fear that you could manage anyways. I hope that all makes sense, but I would just encourage you to go out and learn more and figure out where the insecurities are, because a lot of those knowledge gaps can probably be filled in. And the ones that can't, it's okay to simply not know or simply be unconvinced. That is all of y'all's questions for today. Please feel free to send more in to thepromisebacklundshow@gmail.com for the next episode. For our last thing, I would love to read a poem that I found this week to share with you all. But real quick before that, I will say some of you have asked about Substack and how to subscribe over there. It's free. Like, this podcast is free. It's not monetized right now. It's going to take time, I think, for that to happen, for me to be compensated for the time I'm putting into this, which unfortunately is more time than it should be because I'm so slow at stuff. But I'll get faster over time, and eventually this will be monetized. In the meantime, if you are wanting to support the podcast, I did open up a paid subscription option on Substack. It doesn't offer anything else because I want my content to always be free for you guys. And so I'm not going to put stuff behind a paywall. At least right now, I have no intent to do that because I don't think I want people to be able to access that. But if for as long as I can do that and still pay my bills. And right now I'm thanks to my husband, it's still happening. But if you do want to be a supporter of the work I'm doing and keep it free for everybody, there is a small paid membership option there. You don't get anything else other than the satisfaction of knowing that you're helping out with this project. So on that note, here's this poem, and then I'll let you guys get on with your lovely Sunday doing whatever the hell you want to or need to get done today. This poem is called Joy Comes Back, and it is by Donna Ashworth. When you finally realize that joy is less fireworks, more firefly, less orchestra, more birdsong, she will come back much more often. For joy will not fight with the fast pace of this life. She is not in the shiny or the new. She breathes in the basic, simmers in the simple, and dances in the daily to and fro. Joy has been beckoning you for many a year, my friend. You were just too busy doing to see. The very next time joy wraps her quiet warmth around you, as the garden embraces your weary body in its wildness, tip her a nod. You cannot force her to stay, but if you are a gracious host, joy comes back. Oh, I just love that. I love it so much. I think I told you guys last time, my middle name is Joy, and so I used to hate that word and associate it with religion. But it's my husband's favorite word and always has been for years and years and years. And he calls everything joyous. And it's so cute. And it's made me find a new relationship with the concept of joy and feel like it's not a religious notion. It's just one of the fun things in life. And I don't know. I love this poem. I feel like it ties into the whole presence thing too. On that note, I hope you guys have enjoyed this little episode. Thanks for all the support you've shown so far. Please don't forget to subscribe, like, comment, all the things, so that we can keep this going. And I hope that today you are getting to rest if you need to rest. I hope that you are getting stuff done today if you need to get stuff done. I hope you're spending time with people that you want to spend time with. Most of all, I hope you're spending your Sunday how you want to spend your Sunday. Enjoy your day. Enjoy your week. Go do something kind today.